I'm Shawn Lester, your host of the Real Mental Health Break. Thank you all for being with us today. I'd love to give you, for new folks, a little background on myself. So at first I give you on the resume and then off the resume. So on the resume, I spent 15 years doing international institutional equity sales, selling stocks to banks overseas. Also in 2007, with a partner of mine, we started the first impact investing investment bank. We did a couple of different things, raising money for impact and sustainable companies, working as a placement agent for impact and sustainable funds, putting on different investor convenings. We also had an online investor portal with about 1,000 or so LPs and maybe 10 or so GPs at any one time, limited partners and general partners for people that aren't in the space. And then why are you in mental health, Shawn? Well, I had my own situation happen to me about a year ago where I was in the psych ward. I was also in a mental health facility. And when I came back, I realized that this is a huge problem and huge situation and wanted to help men, women, and families that were also in that same situation. But I'm also very happy that also to get a somewhat of a trailblazer also in this mental health space. Lenny, I'm calling you that now. Is Lenny Mendonca. Really excited to have Lenny. It's great to have you as a guest. Lenny, I would love you to introduce yourself and just tell us a little about the story, and then we'll just go from there.
Sure, happy to, Shawn. Thanks for having me. And it's good to be part of this dialogue, a really important one. So, my short on the resume history was I was at McKinsey for 30 years. I retired in 2013 as a senior partner. I was on the board there, their board of directors for a decade. And then after taking a year off to travel with the Giants when they last won the World Series, San Francisco Giants, I ended up doing what I'm doing now for the most part is boards, nonprofit boards, a little bit of private investing and teaching and writing. In between that, in 2019, late 2018, early 2019, when Gavin Newsom got elected governor, I had told him that I would help him since I'd known him for a long time, since he was in San Francisco, and think very highly of him. What I meant was from the outside, but then he insisted that I come inside,
Yeah.
and I cleared my plate and said, I'll join you for a year or two. And I was his chief economic and business advisor and chair of the High Speed Rail Authority. So that was fabulous. I totally loved the experience and ended up going back to my consulting lifestyle of working 80-hour weeks and being on the road 100 nights that first year.
Yeah.
And then right as COVID started and the world was imploding on us, I, like you, had a very severe set of episodes that I had no idea what was happening. I never had any issues before, and fortunately, my wife and my family and close friends were paying attention. They admitted me to the hospital once overnight, and then I tried to just shake it off and get back to work, and I just couldn't do it. And like you, got admitted to the hospital for my case. It was about 10 days later. And so I had a very substantial depression and anxiety set of episodes that were like completely foreign to me and completely debilitating at the time. That was 3 years ago, and
Mhm.
I'm doing great now. And as part of that recovery process, a couple of months later, my wife and two daughters encouraged me to write something so that I could
Yeah.
share it with people, with friends and family, mostly because probably like you, Shawn, when I stepped away, no one knew what was going on. And I just
Sure.
walked away and went silent for a couple of months. And so I said, sure. And then when I started sharing it, people encouraged me to publish it, which I did. So I wrote a piece on what happened to me.
No, that's super. So I have a question because I can relate to what you're saying, Lenny. So in my case, when I kind of announced what was happening, I had to hit the button on LinkedIn to tell everyone I was starting a new position at the Real, and basically I was in a dark place and starting this thing up, and I was nervous pushing that button. So I'm curious how you felt, writing that, and then also the response that you got.
Sure. The act of writing it was actually cathartic, in part because I could relive in a way that I could tell others what had happened to me and not feel like it didn't happen or that I something to be ashamed of. I had shared it with a few friends, and mostly I got a positive reaction. I had a couple of people who I have a lot of respect for who told me, "Don't you ever share that publicly because it will ruin your life,
Yeah.
and you will forever be talked about as that guy who that happened to."
Yes.
And I said, "Okay, that's great. That's all the more reason why I need to press send." And I sent it to Cal Matters, which is a big nonprofit journalism in Sacramento, which everyone reads in the capital. And I know the people there, and I sent it to them, and they said, "Oh, this is amazing. We're going to print it right away." And so um, I sent press send, and the response. I've probably written dozens, if not 100, op-eds in my
Uh-huh.
life, and this one got an order of magnitude more response than anything else I've written, including the Cal Matters and the San Francisco Chronicle editorializing on it.
Yeah, yeah. I had a similar, very positive response. A lot of people reached out and super supportive. So, after you wrote that and people came back, what was kind of the next step in your journey, Lenny? What were you doing?
So I wrote this um, in July. My episodes happened in April, so I was already not completely, but very much on the path to recovery. So it was part of that continuation of that process. And part of what happened, as I'm sure happened to you, Shawn, is I had dozens of people reach out to me. Many of whom I knew, but a lot I did not, and they
Yep.
wanted tell me their story and talk. And so I responded to everyone.
Hmm.
Sadly, a number of the responses were didn't have happy endings, and it
Hmm.
was kind of I wish I'd people had been talking about this before. But I had, part of my reason for writing this is I'm sure kind of how you're thinking about this too, is if you can help one other person, that's incredibly rewarding. And I had an enormous amount of people say that because of reading it, they ended up getting help themselves or convincing a family member or a friend or a coworker to get help. And
Right.
to me, that's the by far the most rewarding part about it. I wrote this not that I have any, I mean, as I always say, I know nothing about this topic other than my N of one personal experience. But
Hmm.
I very strongly felt, and even more so now after the response, that when I broke my leg mountain biking and would go out and see people, they can't miss seeing you got a cast on your leg, and they always ask what happened. Like,
Yeah.
well, I broke my leg mountain biking, and after the usual joke about aren't you too old to be mountain biking, they got okay. Well, you're going to get better, and you'll be back on your feet again.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It's a
Yeah.
mental health episode. You can't see it, and
Exactly.
people are when you say something happened, you often get a oh, like I don't know how to respond to it. So to me, it's the same thing. It's just another health episode, and the more
Yeah.
we can talk about it that way and make sure we have the kind of coverage and care that I was in, obviously very privileged to get because I had great health insurance and I got immediately into Stanford Hospital, which is, neither of those are commonplace. And
Hmm.
on top of that, I had people around me who were really caring and made sure I got it. So that shouldn't be uncommon. If I broke my leg, they don't say, "Oh, that's interesting. We'll make an appointment for you in 6 weeks if you're lucky enough to have coverage." It's like, well, that's not the way we treat broken bones. That's not the way we should treat mental health.
No, of course, you're preaching to the choir. I feel the same way, and I had some of the same experiences where lots of guys would call me after they just want to talk and talk about their story. And similar to you, I'm not a therapist, but when you've kind of been there and had that feeling, you can relate to other people in a different way that haven't been there. So, and that's part of kind of like the real. We have mental health sponsors that basically help out other guys that are in a similar type of position. So I totally get it. And then I also get, when I had my thing, where do you go? What do you do? It's very besides the money, it's also just confusing.
Right.
What do you do in this situation? Did it ever come up in on your side of where to go or help people find resources?
Absolutely. In my case, as I said, and I said this in my piece, I recognized that I was in a privileged position of having
Hmm.
great health care, and because of where I live and relationships, I had easy access to the hospital,
Yeah.
which was even both that and professionals were even more short during the beginning of COVID because everything was closing.
Yes.
Um, and so all of that, I was lucky. But as I was exiting Stanford, they required you to go into outpatient care, obviously. And at
Yep.
that point, there was no in person. Was all remote
Uh,
because of COVID. And I had to search for a while. They helped me, and I found one in Southern California, and I enrolled in it, and it didn't work for me. It
right. Right.
was group that was typically in on site, but they moved it to remote. And I was probably 30 years older than everybody else in very different circumstances, and it just made it worse, not better. So I told them I'm not going to do this, and I ended up just finding someone locally who's literally 5 miles from me, but in the entire time we've never met in person. It's all been video and phone, and that was very effective.
Yeah, it's interesting because I also have the same experience where I went to the treatment centers, and yeah, mostly 18 to 25-year-olds, which is great. But I just turned 55, so it was a little bit unusual. I would say even harder for you being that during COVID, because when I was in the centers, there was a big, even though people were younger, older, there was community, but I don't know how you do such a thing. Um, you know, you can virtually, but it's just not the same. So
No,
so
it's
I get how you feel. So let me ask you, and people always ask me, right? I say there's no like rocket science, and I give some things that I did, but are there a couple like two or three things that you did or changed your mindset in a way that helped you, come out of that?
sure. I'm happy to tell you with the caveat that I'm sure you say as well is, my experience is my experience
Yes.
and everyone's different.
Yes.
For me, there was a little bit of medication, but that I'm off of that, and that was not that important other than very early on. And it early on may as much have been could have been a placebo for all I know, but
Yeah.
it got
Yeah.
me feeling like something was happening. To me, it was fundamentally about sleep and exercise, particularly getting outside. And so
Mm-hmm.
during the darkest parts, I was not sleeping at all,
Mm-hmm.
and my mind never unwound. And I think it needed to hit the reset button. And then, so now I get good night's sleep and also get out every day and get some exercise. But it's as much being out in nature as it is the hard exercise. And those two things just allow me to clear my mind and be helpful. And so, I did have conversations with therapists that went on for a little while and ended up
Mm-hmm.
um, fading over time. But a lot of it was just resetting my mindset around, you can't work 80 hours a week and be on the road all the time and never rest. So I think that was as much as anything.
Yeah, I had a similar experience. So especially when I first was, and I've been depressed sometimes in my life, but this was the worst occasion. But adding on, like you, I was having trouble eating. I would have trouble sleeping. I think that just has a multiplier effect on your body, and then my body just said no, no more, right? No mas. So it just kind of my brain just kind of shut down. So I get
Yeah.
exactly what you're saying. And, I think just talking about medication, I think all those things are great: medication, therapy, community, but it's not like one thing that does it. And yeah, when I was in the psych ward or those other places, they were giving me tons of medication. So I'm on one medication now, but I was on like six at one time. It was a little bit crazy. And my
Yeah.
my wife would say, medicate, like you said, sometimes she doesn't. It's everyone's different, and they do a lot of trial and error on each person because they don't know exactly what's going to work. And then my wife would say, you're so deep into it, no matter what medication they give you, you can't really stop a horse, right? Because my brain was just running, you know. And then
Yep.
and then Lenny, I'm curious. Uh, when you so were you sorry, I got a little confused. So you still in the minute? Were you in the administration when
I,
that
I
was happening?
was I was in administration, and I started with just a couple days sick leave, and then tried to go back part time and ease back into it. And I couldn't do it, so I had to say I was resigning. And I will say, without exception, everyone around me was fantastic. They were whatever you need, that's most important. How can we help? One person in particular, who I won't name out of privacy, was called my wife every day just
Yes.
to ask how I was doing. And that it shows, it really does matter if the people around you are caring and helpful and understanding. And
Yeah.
the response I got from I wouldn't say almost everyone, the vast majority of people I was working with was, um, you know, this is in everyone or everyone's family at least. And
Yes.
so, we know what you're going through, and take what you need to get better.
Yes. Yes. So I keep on agreeing with you. I'm sorry, but I have a similar experience. So I've had maybe like 300 conversations, and this is never 1 degree away from anybody. This is 0 degrees
Absolutely.
or half a degrees away.
Yep.
So I have to ask you, I'm not going to get political, but what is certain things are not, being done in society? How do you see some, it doesn't matter what aisle, side of the
Yeah.
aisle, but how could you see some things that should be changed, or, how do you see it from your
Sure.
position?
Sure. So I think some of it is absolutely policy and government related. I'll come back to those in a second, but I think there's a whole lot of other things that have nothing to do with that.
Yes.
So the stigma issue is something that we can all help with. And I think there's been a lot of progress on that topic, in particular, since a number of well known people have
Hmm.
articulated and come and explained their situation. It just makes it easier. So I'm sure you found this too, but in the professional sports and entertainment world, this is like people just talk about it like it's no big deal all the
Hmm.
time.
Hmm.
In the business world and in the political world, that's absolutely not true,
Right.
unfortunately. And so part of what I'm saying, I'm not an expert on any of the rest of this. I am an experienced in why we all need to talk about this and treat it as a health issue and nothing more than that. And so I think this destigmatization and workplace responses are really fundamental. Forget all the rest of it for a second. I A lot of the requests I get to speak are to business audiences, probably
Hmm.
like you,
Hmm.
and I know what I am. I'm a prop to have the conversation that they want to have.
Right.
And I always say, if you think you've got this under control, pick up your phone and dial your employee assistance program and see what kind of response you get. Um, God bless them for having it, but
Yeah.
the quality and responsiveness is generally absolutely horrible, and companies need to deal with that. From a policy standpoint, I think there are um, uh, three things. Number one, it is the law; it's not enforced. That you
Hmm.
need to have mental health parity in insurance programs, and so if it really is an illness like anything else, it needs to
Hmm.
be covered in the same mechanisms, in the same limited copays, and in the same opportunity to have multiple treatments that other health issues are. Number one. Number two, we need to have a much more responsive and fast uh, dealing, fast turnaround capacity. It's, as I said, it's not helpful to say we'll see you in 6 weeks. If it's severe, that it has to happen immediately, and there's no question you can't. And I know some of the major providers have agreed to this now. Is they need to have a no more than 10-day individual response, which to me is still long, but it's better than 6 months response to an appointment and for follow-up appointments. So they need to be responsive. And finally, this is, I think, in many ways exacerbated by a massive shortage of mental health professionals. And so we need more psychologists, psychiatrists, but more importantly, we need more therapists and first people who are trained and able to give early and quick response. And that is going to require both more resources, but it's going to require a lot of innovation in how we deliver that. We can't, the challenge and the need is progressing faster than the capacity. And so if that's a business problem, you got to deal with capacity problem, and that's going to take some innovation because we can't wait to train people for 12 years to get them to be able to do this.
Sure. And then looking at it from also a productivity standpoint, right? I think the numbers are kind of insane of the lost productivity. So, in essence, how do you see that for companies just, you know, just running? You're at McKinsey, so you know about these types of things. How do
Yeah.
you see that as a part of the
So
normal
again,
operating procedures?
yeah. So actually, my old firm has been one of the more responsive, and spoken with them, and they're writing about this a lot with that very lens into it. So, like other health and issues, if you're not at work, and in this case, in many instances, people are sort of at work but not engaged,
Yeah,
there's an enormous productivity cost. And so, if you don't have a human soul and know that this is the right thing to do to deal with human beings, just think about it from a straightforward business lens. It really is incredibly important to have a healthy and engaged workforce.
yeah,
And
more
so
productive.
it's in your interest as an employer to make sure that this is covered and has the kind of care that you need to get people back in the frame of mind and the ability to be showing up at work. I mean, I guarantee you, if you're, as you know, if you're having even minor, let alone severe episodes, you are not going to be able to work or be engaged at work. It's just not possible.
Sure, sure, sure. No, I get it. And then, of course, you're from the great state of California. We see the, California behind you.
Yeah.
And this is not a, I like to always like to say this isn't like a Republican or Democratic issue. This is a human issue. But I know it's California. I just saw some new legislation, I think, out of California. I don't know if you saw some of that new things that were coming out.
Well, there are um, a whole range of things that have been part of the equation.
Yeah,
It intersects with some other issues like homelessness and some criminal justice issues. To this really, if someone is having a um, mental health issue, it shouldn't get treated and responded to by the police and through our, the largest mental health facility in the country is the LA jail system. That's
right,
not the way to deal with this. And
right.
so I'm trying to think about how to do that, including having a separate criminal court system called care courts that
Mm-hmm.
responds to people who have had run-ins with criminal justice system, but because of mental health issues, and therefore you've got more specialized um, approaches to how to respond to that and make sure that they're treated appropriately and get the help they need.
Yeah, I think it's also tough for police on
Absolutely.
and those types of folks, first responders, that they have to deal with this, but it's kind of a different animal than maybe they're used to. So that's definitely a, a big challenge.
I also say that I have, and you probably have too, had been asked to speak to um, uh, our law enforcement and first responder communities. And not only do they have to deal with it, in terms of responding to things, they're as likely or more likely to have the
Sure.
challenges themselves. And it's important. And I've seen some great leaders who are really completely aware and attuned to that issue among their officers, and they need to be and should be, because if you're dealing with trauma all the time, human brain's not set up to continually be in a situation of high alert in that way.
Yeah, that also goes to obviously to the military, which is
Yes.
you're kind of living that every day. So it's hard to expect people to go back and not obviously everyone's affected. It's kind of normal that they're affected. Like, why would you think that they wouldn't be? Yeah,
Right, exactly. And the military's gotten better, and most law enforcement and fire first responders have gotten better about um, being attuned to that issue and providing the care and support they need. And it's, as you said, it's not just active military. It's anyone who's
sure.
been in those environments. It's probably never going to go away. And so, how do you be responsive to that? Um, it's important, and it's harder. And I know you're talking about this. It's, the kind of um, alpha male type
Yes,
environments are the worst.
yes,
Uh,
yes, yes.
and it's that's why I think it's important. Almost always when I'm talking about this, talk about sports examples, because
Yes.
most males, particularly hard charging males, kind of think they're a football player or whatever. And you're not. If you're a professional athlete, um, they all have mental conditioning coaches in addition to physical conditioning.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes total sense. You got to be on the top of your game when you're competing at that level. And increasingly in senior executive ranks, people have personal coaches as well. It used to
Yeah.
be seen in the early days as, oh well, if you've got a coach, that means the senior people think you're a problem and you need extra help.
Right.
Now
Right.
it's like, if you don't have a coach, what's wrong with you? They're not investing in you. And a lot of that support is, some of it's making you a better executive, but some of it's just talking to you about being a human being, and it's a different kind of therapeutic support.
Yeah. Yeah. No, for sure. Now, a lot of people are going to ask this question, Lenny. I'm going to bring it up if it's okay.
Yeah.
They're going to say, "Did Lenny read all those books behind him?" That's what they're going to ask me, and I'll go, "I don't.
No,
I don't know."
that's so there's a lot of them. This is my office and library, and it's one of the benefits of having a lot of friends that are authors, and so I
Yeah.
get sent a lot of books,
Yeah.
and I have not read all of them. I read many of them, but not all of them.
Do you tell them that you haven't read their book yet?
No, I do. Someone I know who sent it to me, I will immediately go and buy one in
Okay.
addition and give one away because I know that's how they make a living. I at a minimum, I look through it and see if it's of interest. But I'm involved with a bunch of author groups and things, so you can't keep up with them. It's no
Right.
possible way.
Right. Right. So on that, like, can you give us a little, what you're doing now? Where
Sure,
are we now, type of thing?
sure. So I am in the kind of broken leg analogy. I went through some intensive period to get back on my feet for a few
Uh-huh.
months, and then for the last 18 months, I've been back doing exactly what I was doing before I went into government. I'm
Yeah. Yeah.
in chairing two large nonprofit boards, involved in eight, I think, other ones. I own a brewery and restaurant in my hometown. I
Yeah.
with others purchased our local newspaper. I'm writing a monthly column. So I'm doing all those kind of things that was what I was doing before I went to the government. And importantly, I have three grandkids, two granddaughters and a grandson, all of whom live in my hometown. So I'm saving a lot of time to spend time with them,
That
including
brings up.
Halloween last night.
I was going to ask that was an important question of what they dressed up as. We need to point
A
that out.
Cookie Monster. Abby Cadabby from Sesame Street was one family, and their mom was Elmo, and their dad was Big Bird, and my other granddaughter was Lightning McQueen from Cars, and
Good
her
job.
parents were the pit crew.
Yes, those are some good quality costumes.
Yeah,
And
it's
then
fun.
what did you dress as,
I
Lenny?
dressed as uh, a boring old middle-aged white guy. It was really hard to do it. I had
But
a I had a Halloween Hawaiian shirt because that's all I wear. So
okay,
it was a
okay.
gift.
Okay, okay. I have a giant baby face. I wear baby face, and I have pajamas. And this is my favorite costume because it's really easy. I've been doing it for 6 years because you always get a reaction from the kids. They're like, "Look at that giant baby, mommy!"
Yeah,
Or some of them get scared, but at least it's Halloween, so you're supposed to get scared.
yeah.
Um, Lenny, we're coming towards the end here of the show. It's been great. Are there like a couple of things, lots of people, you have, so much knowledge, could be takeaway in mental health or just be in life, a couple of tidbits, three or four that come to your mind?
Yeah. So, and these are going to be things that you're probably going to say are obvious, but they wouldn't have been obvious to me before. Is number one, personally, everyone needs to pay as much attention to their mental wellness as they do to their physical wellness. And so, especially acute in people in hard driving or really demanding jobs, is you just don't take the time to step back and recharge and get yourself in a good space. And you have to do that. It's, you're just like you can't operate without refueling and eating and
Yeah,
drinking. You can't operate by running your brain all the time. You got to let it relax and sleep and take care of yourself. So that's the first thing. The second thing is um, be attentive and um, um, understanding of your family members and colleagues. Uh,
hmm
we have to have a mental health system that deals with this from a medical care standpoint, but we're in the first line of defense, and by far it's really, really important. And if someone's feeling isolated or they're acting different, uh, have a conversation with them in a non-judgmental way, and if they need help, encourage them or help them to get that help in a non-judgmental way. I think that's really important. The third thing I'd say, which is part of, I basically, when people ask me to speak to a group, I say yes. And most of those have been because of my background, either senior leadership teams or business groups.
Mm-hmm.
As we talked about earlier, I think this is a business imperative
Yeah.
that since most people in their working lives spend the majority of their waking hours at work, it is really important that businesses and executives take this seriously and make space for the conversation and pay attention and do all of the things that you do for loved ones. But in addition, you've got an extra responsibility around being engaged in the healthcare responsiveness for coverage and capacity issues. So I think that's the third thing. And then the last thing, I just think as human beings, the more we actually interact with people as human beings and
Mm-hmm.
non-judgmentally, when you just don't say, how are you doing? Because people are
Sure.
going, great. Like, try and engage in a real conversation to get people to be open. And it really does help a lot. It's amazing how there's been all kinds of work on this, that someone who's having really challenging personal issues, the fact of anyone responding to them in a way that shows that they care about them as a human being can be literally life-saving. And so, we all have a responsibility to, not just to our friends and family, but if someone's looking like they're having a bad day, they probably are having a bad day.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. No, that's I wanna thank you, and I want to thank you for that amazing advice. And it was great to have you on the show, Lenny. And then we're gonna post the article that you referenced before, and love people to listen to this. I think share it with other folks. It's just kind of two old white guys that have gone through some stuff, right? And this happens to, I'm going to say, everyone's at some points at a 2 or 4 or 6. I was at a 10, but everyone's going through something. So just understand that. But again, appreciate everybody. And then we'll looking forward to seeing you next week at the same time. Thanks again.
Great. Thanks, Shawn. Thanks for all you're
Listen,
doing.
thanks.
Take care.